Hello and welcome to Boise State University in the Community. I'm your host, Peter Rallis, and joining us tonight is Professor Matt Hansen. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Peter.
Now, how long have you been part of the Boise State family?
I've been here since 2005, 11 years.
And what courses do you teach?
I teach in the English department, so I teach a variety of courses in English literature primarily, especially the Shakespeare course, English 345, which I teach every spring. I've also taught in the Foundational Studies program in the past, specifically UF 200 Civic and Ethical Foundations.
Now, for a college Shakespearean course, what piece of literature do you teach?
In the Shakespeare course here, and this is true at a lot of universities, we focus primarily on the plays. I bring in some of Shakespeare's sonnets and other poetry occasionally, but the focus is mainly on Shakespeare's plays.
Now, I know another thing that you're part of is outside of Boise State. You do something called coordinating Shakespeare in schools for students. What's that about?
That's right. So since 2006, I've run a service learning program out of my undergraduate Shakespeare course that I call Shake It Up After School. So my students and I go into now 3 different Title I elementary schools here in Boise and work with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to teach them about Shakespeare by helping them to prepare a 1-hour performance version of one of Shakespeare's plays.
Oh, wow. And I know the language is very kind of tough, especially for kids that young. How do you translate that for them?
So we don't translate. We just take Shakespeare's language and we kind of cut it down to size. So most of Shakespeare's plays would probably be just on a straightforward kind of page print, 90 to 100 pages, and we cut it down to around a 35 to 39 page performance script. So we just kind of simplify the language, streamline it at times, take out classical references and things that most 21st century audience members aren't really going to pick up on anyway, and try to make it a little bit more accessible both for the elementary performers and the audiences that they're going to perform for.
And how did you first get involved with this program?
It really came about through the work of Cara Brascia and the folks in the service learning program. That when I was a new faculty member here, I attended a workshop with the service learning program where they introduced this idea that service learning is a really engaged and engaging form of pedagogy where students do meaningful service in the community that then relates to the content that they're studying in the course. And that got my wheels turning about how I might be able to have community service as a part of the Shakespeare course that I taught regularly. And it occurred to me that then getting Shakespeare into the schools, and in particular into the hands of younger students before they're going to encounter it as part of the official curriculum, could be a really beneficial thing. And then in particular working with Title I elementary schools, where sometimes there are some resource issues and sometimes the student families that are a part of those schools have some resource issues relative to accessing quality after school programs, particularly in things like the arts and literacy, that this might be a really good bringing together of a couple of elements that would serve both my students here at Boise State and other students in the community.
Oh, so the students help you with these programs in the elementary school?
That's right. So as a service learning program, it's really my students in the undergrad Shakespeare course that are teaching Shakespeare to younger students. So as they're learning more about Shakespeare in my class, performing scenes from Shakespeare, digging into Shakespeare's language and characters and storytelling conventions, then they're turning around and teaching some of those same things to younger learners.
And how do you pique the interest of these younger kids to get excited about the Shakespeare that they're learning about?
Well, there are a number of things that kind of work in to my advantage for that. The first is that with all 3 of the schools that I'm now partnered with, I've had relatively long-term partnerships. One school I've been partners with for 8 years, another for I think 6, and one for 5. So we've got a kind of institutional credibility and institutional memory at those schools that if we have students that are coming to those elementary schools and attending starting in kindergarten through the 6th grade, for the most part now nearly at all 3 of those schools there has never not been an after-school Shakespeare program there. So it's just part of what they come to expect, and when they come to see the performances each spring, well, I especially really encourage the principals to have the third graders as well as the rest of the fourth, fifth, and sixth graders who get to see their classmates performing come to the performances, but the third graders with then the idea that once they move into fourth grade in the next year that they can be a part of this program as well.
And what pieces of literature do you teach the younger kids?
It's the same thing. It's the play. And we did one experiment last year where instead of doing a whole play cut down to size, we chose a number of scenes from several different plays kind of organized along different themes. But with them, again, we're digging into the plays, and we found that the program is most successful when we really just focus in on one particular play and follow the entire story arc that Shakespeare has to tell for the journey that those characters in that particular play travel.
How long do these programs usually last with the elementary school students?
So we're in the schools, depending on the school, around 6 to 7 weeks. And we're there Monday through Thursdays in the afternoons, since it's an after-school program, roughly 3 to 5 or 3 to 5:30, depending on when the school gets out. And so we're working with the students to then kind of understand the play, to assign parts for performance and dig into their characters. And then at the end of those 7 weeks, they'll do 2 performances of their 1-hour version of Shakespeare.
Wow, and have you noticed that the students are really eager to kind of pick this information up and perform it?
They're completely hungry for it. They really just love it. They seem to eat it up, and every year when I'm introducing this idea to my undergraduate students, I try to prepare them for the experience, both in terms of the amount of time and emotional energy that will go into it, but also the extent to which they will be astounded by these 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, that particularly when they encounter, say, a 12-year-old in 6th grade, that this might be the third play by Shakespeare that this kid has tackled.
Oh, wow.
And they've become increasingly enthusiastic and expert.
That's cool. Do you also provide costumes and set pieces for these performances?
We do. I've been pretty successful over the years in securing some grant funds, both from the city of Boise and from some other private foundations to support the work that we do. So I've built up a pretty decent costume library, and we've built set pieces over time that then are repaintable and reusable. I've acquired my own portable theatrical lighting setup and a set of curtains. So we basically kind of come into these schools and we take over the gymnasium for the better part of a week and transform it into a theater with curtains and lights and a sound system and set.
Wow.
And costumes and the whole 9 yards.
So do they perform for the school or for the other students?
They perform one performance during the school day. So usually after lunch, so kind of say 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon, and depending on the school and how much space they have in the gym, we'll either perform for pretty much the whole school, so 1st through 6th grade, or even sometimes we'll have the kindergartners there. But as I said, I especially try to encourage the principals to at least have the 3rd through 6th grade, so the 3rd graders can see what's coming up, and the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders can see the work that their classmates have invested over 6 or 7 weeks in terms of preparing this production. And then we do a second performance in the evening, the early evening, that then is going to be hopefully, and more often than not, more conducive to parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends' schedules, since they're working during the middle of the day, that then if we have a performance at say 6 o'clock at night, we can get more people there in a second performance.
So over the years, have you noticed, has the program expanded at all, or do you kind of stick with the same schools and districts?
Well, it expanded from starting it out initially just with one school partnership, and then I've slowly expanded to the 3 partnerships that I have now. But with the enrollment that I have in my class, and less enrollments would suddenly come to the point that I was facing really significant and long waiting lists, which would be a wonderful challenge to have, and I was able to add multiple sections of the course. We're kind of at maximum capacity. That the number of undergraduates that I have enrolled in the class then are a really good size to staff the after-school program at each of those 3 sites under the direction and leadership of returning students. So after students have taken my class in the spring, I teach this course every spring, that then I've had very good luck in having students return in subsequent years and semesters to then move into increasing roles of responsibility and leadership. And so they serve as site directors at the individual school sites and really run the day-to-day operation, and are assisted by 8 to 10 approximately students from my current undergraduate course.
And what's the most difficult part about putting this whole thing together?
Probably the logistics and the time management,
Yeah.
right? That I'm running this program at 3 school sites, so I can't be all places at all times. So I'm generally at each school site at least once a week, and then floating around and trying to support my students in the current class and my student leaders who are returning to do this work with me. But that's a challenge, and so as a result, a lot of it relies on advanced planning. So we spend some time, even during the summer, usually it's during the summer that we'll have finalized our selection of, okay, what play are we going to do next spring, and then I'll work with my returning leaders, and we will be the ones that then cut Shakespeare's 100 or so page play down to that sort of 35-page performance script. Throughout the fall, we'll meet and have a number of planning meetings to really kind of be as prepared as we can be to hit the ground running in the spring. But that's turned it into not what looks at some ways just like a kind of 6 or 7 week program each spring, into a year-long endeavor. And then I add to that applying for grants, and then if I'm successful in getting grants, managing the budget for those grants and writing my exit reports or kind of follow-up reports to say what I did, what great things I did with the money that I was generously given, and things like that. So it really is kind of snowballed, but that's work that I'm more than willing to take on.
So through all of that, what's been the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
I think the 2 things that are most rewarding are seeing what it does in terms of the elementary students, the confidence that they take on, the obvious thrill and joy that they have performing. And so we could be performing anything, it wouldn't have to be Shakespeare, but there's an added level of challenge, I think, with that idea that Shakespeare, that, as you said, the language is really difficult. Everyone has this perception that Shakespeare is pretty tough stuff. It's pretty sophisticated. It's a pretty high level of cultural capital. And so I think that those kids being able to then have that positive experience in terms of performing something that everybody is preparing them and telling them is really challenging or really difficult, boosts them up. The second part is really the community that's cohered among the Boise State students and now alumni that have been a part of this program, that they return kind of year after year to volunteer their time and to help me to run this program, and they just have a different kind of college experience, I think, than they would have without the opportunity that this kind of community has provided. That I've attended 2 weddings of former students who have been involved in the program, and in both instances, bridesmaids and other members of the wedding party were other students from my Shakespeare class, and there was just something kind of magical that all came together that I can't take full credit for, but that I'm really proud was something of the kind of incidental magic that happened.
That's cool. And finally, I want to ask you, talk about the importance of keeping Shakespeare alive in the classroom.
So, keeping Shakespeare alive in the classroom, which one? The elementary classroom or the college or
I guess
university
on both
classroom?
levels.
Yeah. I think it's really kind of doing the sorts of things, I'm biased, but in doing the sorts of things that I'm doing in terms of really actively engaging with Shakespeare and getting Shakespeare up on its feet. That any form of dramatic literature can certainly be read in your armchair and pored over in your study and analyzed, and that's very valuable and meaningful work. But I think getting up and performing it even with little or no rehearsal reveals new insights. I had a student several years ago who kind of described my class both with the student learning, the service learning component of it, but the in-class performances that I ask students to do and the other really imaginative and creatively engaging aspects of the course as getting your hands dirty with Shakespeare. And I think that pretty accurately characterizes what I'm going for, is just that kind of willingness to take risks, make a mess, and see what kind of wonderful things might emerge from that mess.
And it's really great. I really want to thank you a lot for coming in and speaking with us about your program, because it really seems exciting, and I hope it continues to flourish for you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'm Peter Rallis. You've been watching Boise State University in the Community. Thank you.